Right. Good morning.
Good evening. Good afternoon.
Whatever part of the world you're in.
Welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict Live.
It's good to have you guys. We're really excited.
And we'd like to thank all of you. We've now reached a benchmark in terms of subscriptions. It's now over 10,500. And we want to thank you because you are responsible for helping us achieve this enormous victory.
Well, indeed, Ross, I couldn't thank them enough. I mean, thanks to you guys. It's because of you where we are today. And I also wanted to comment about really what I found very interesting about our viewers. It's the level of respect in their writing.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I looked at some other videos, some other YouTube channels and all that stuff. And the language there, it's a little bit different, but for ours, we truly couldn't thank you enough. Very engaging questions, very engaging comments, and because of your support, we have crossed this milestone today. And also, we want to thank our Patreon members, and we want to let you know about that membership. So check it out and see what perks that membership offers, because we want to grow that as well.
You know, so much has happened this week, and matter of fact, in the last 48 hours. And before we jump into our main topic today, maybe we could have a very brief discussion on what's going on in Belarus.
Yeah, for the last 48 hours events that took place around the world. So, yeah, for Belarus, the landing of that Ryanair that was forced to land in Minsk, it's because it has an opposition journalist, and the West and the EU went crazy about it and all that. But here is the funny thing, Ross. The West didn't say a word back in 2013 when the plane that was carrying the Bolivian president, Morales at the time, was forced to land in Switzerland because authorities were thinking Edward Snowden was on that plane. And nothing was said about the safety of the passengers. Nothing was said about. So you can just see the double
You don't
standard.
mean it was a double standard, do you?
Oh, well, I think it was. So,
well, let me bring up something else maybe you'd comment briefly. You know, Putin and Biden are going to be meeting.
That's correct. That date has been set sometime in June. And I think we ought to do a show about the American-Russian relations. And
I think so,
What
too.
do you guys think? You know, we'll hear your feedback about that one if that would be a good show you would be interested in knowing about.
HSBC, behind the scenes.
Oh, my gosh, that's a big deal because that's the one involved in the Huawei executive detention in Canada. And we're going to touch on that one. What's interesting about that one, Ross, is that there are now some information coming out indicating that HSBC has been involved with the government in undermining Huawei.
Oh,
yeah, it was. I found some very disturbing information suggesting that, and I'm going to just quote here, that the U.S. prosecutors overlooked violation of U.S. sanctions against Iran by HSBC in exchange for cooperation with an investigation into Huawei. So you can just put the two together and figure out. And we're going to talk about all this in detail.
Just yesterday it was announced there's going to be trade talks between the United States and China. These will be the first trade talks with Biden as president.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, that's correct. The trade talk did take place yesterday, as a matter of fact. So they did meet, but nothing of substance to report, which indicate what? That the China's kind of like, they'll shrug their shoulder, whatever, because they have the leverage. The U.S. does not have the leverage. So those talks didn't yield anything expected. So China's going to just play it.
Well, also, we know that China's always in it for the long term.
That's correct.
You know, when we did that show on the investment negotiation between Russia and European Union, that was a 7-year negotiation.
Between China and the EU.
Yeah.
That's correct, yeah. So just we wanted to bring this up just to let you know the trade talks didn't yield any results. So,
I'm not surprised.
We won't be. So Well, today we're gonna be talking about in detail about the detention of let me see if I can pronounce your name correctly based on your assistance with this. Meng Wanzhou.
All
Did I
right.
pronounce it correctly?
Close enough.
That's great. So what we decided to do today is really go into depth about that issue. We did launch the first part of the video about the economic impact, and we're going to be releasing soon the second part, which has to do with the geopolitical impact of Madam Meng
Wanzhou.
detention.
Meng Wanzhou.
Yeah, it's gonna lead to and what we're gonna do, like we always do, we'll do about 15-20 minutes discussions and
then open it up to your questions.
Then we'll open up to your questions. So yeah, and usually ask for your questions to be part of the chat later on. So, and we will address all those. So why do we want to go into the depth of this, Ross?
Well, there are a couple of there are a long list of things. One of them is the loss of reputation for international law concerning Canada and the United States. Another is human rights. Another is the economic impact. And the backdrop of this is that Chinese people are everywhere on the planet. Practically every major city has a substantial Chinese population. Right now in Canada, the population is 18%.
Wow.
I mean, that's enormous.
It is enormous indeed.
And so we're looking at Meng Wanzhou, December 1st, 2018, was detained by the Canadian Royal Mounted Police under very questionable circumstances at the Vancouver airport. She was deprived of her rights. Her rights were not read to her. She was isolated with no legal representation, and she was forced to yield the code to her cell phone, which is all against Canadian law. And this is all, the backdrop of this is the United States government ordered Canada to do this.
Yeah.
So it really brings into question, what is the relationship between the United States and Canada, that Canada would break a long history of great relationships with China to do this?
That's correct. But there are a lot of questions that some international lawyers, experts in these matters, have addressed that. Now it became clear that her arrest is illegal. Now we're not talking about the allegations. Those are separate because the whole thing is so complicated. And we wanted to do this live, so to break it down for you in a simple terminology, of course, based to our knowledge, and to have an understanding that, it might not seem what it is. There is always something behind.
The news behind the news.
That's
What's
correct.
really going on here?
That's correct. So let's first start with her detention. Well, her detention was conducted incommunicado. That's usually a violation. Second, for international law and Canadian laws, is you cannot detain somebody without letting them know what they have been arrested for.
And Meng Wanzhou was not informed.
No, she was not. And the third one has to do with you do not force access to the cell phone evidence because no crime has been committed yet. So basically what the officer from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police did wanted to have access to her phone so he can get that information, steal the information, and guess what? Turn it over to the US. And the information pertaining to Huawei. So this is where it becomes very, very not only tricky, but like a clear violation of the international law, how detentions and so forth needs to be happened. Now, there are those who argue that, well, Canada and the US have an extradition treaty.
Which is true.
They do.
It's verifiable.
They do. But like you said last time, Ross, no crime was committed on the US soil.
Nor on Canadian soil.
Yeah, that's one. Second, the treaty has to fall, the extradition has to follow in certain protocols. And here is an example just for you to understand. For example, there is an extradition treaty between the EU, the European Union, and the United States, right? However, the EU is putting a condition. We will not extradite anybody from the EU member countries to the United States if he or she will be subject to that penalty.
Correct.
So that's
Canada is the same situation, I believe.
I do not know.
I read it yesterday, and they said that was the case.
That was the case, yeah. And this is what was the case with Julian Assange, for example. But Julian Assange was in England, and England now is not a member of the EU. So they are two separate things. So the issue of her arrest is bringing up forth the questions of the legality.
Oh, yeah. And keep in mind that Meng Wanzhou is the CFO of Huawei,
yeah,
and the daughter of the founder.
That's correct. So,
and the backdrop is that President Trump
at the time
issued this request, if you want to call it a request, of Canada, because he thought it would be a nice bargaining chip in the negotiations
between China and the US regarding trade. That's correct. Yeah, I won't call it a request. I will call it an order. And that brings the question. Like one of our viewers yesterday put a comment, and I responded to it, and I did mention to him that I will address it. It has to do with the sovereignty, which was a great comment, and it was logical argument. That becomes the question of sovereignty.
Oh,
yeah, because every nation, as we all know, is a sovereign state,
right? Which
means you, as another country, cannot dictate to how a country behaves domestically or whatever. So, and that sovereignty start to brought to a question when it comes down to Canada, why it followed the order from the United States blindly, knowing that other countries have turned the United States request for her arrest.
Another question this is, Canada has had a spectacular history with China. The Prime Minister Trudeau, his father actually was the first Western country to open up to China even before Nixon went.
That's correct.
And they have enjoyed a wonderful trade relationship and cultural relationship with several 100,000 Chinese students going through universities in Canada. With million plus people from China permanently living in Canada. Great culture, great culture exchange, great educational exchange, and China pays those university students fees, which Canada benefits from the money. And of course, there's all the trade issues of commodities going back and forth, which is not trivial.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, did approach the relationship with China differently than Justin. So apparently, because politics has changed. Of course, a global setting has changed. It's understandably, but it's no justification for why Justin Trudeau will approve. Because rest assured that he was aware of the setting, the whole setting, as the request was coming, or the order that was coming from the White House. Because if they went ahead with the detention, that means he approved it,
right?
And he approved it based on what, and that brings to question two things: not only the legality, but also Justin Trudeau's understanding of geopolitics. Is he an amateur, as one of our viewers put a comment, who happens to be a Canadian, But also this one ties to the upcoming elections in Canada. Now it is up to the Canadians to decide, because they have been lied to. And we can't get involved into domestic politics of Canada because
they're a sovereign country. They make up their own mind about the government that they want.
That is correct.
What's interesting to follow how so much of the Canadian government sided with Trudeau, and the whole rhetoric about China became more like the United States. Enemy, enemy, enemy. We need to beware. They're spying. All of that. And you see multiple references in the Canadian press about the dangers of China.
Well, this is why
all of a sudden.
You're absolutely correct. This is why it was important. Like I read some comments yesterday, and some of our viewers did bring up good questions regarding a French telecom company was not treated the same way Huawei is treated now. So you can just see where the double standard is. Executives from this bank, the HSBC.
You got it.
I got it finally. They won't. Even though they violated the sanctions regarding,
Right.
they won't punish, and all of a sudden the focus is on Huawei and China, and this is where we wanted to bring this up. Again, we don't side with anybody. We don't. This is not a preaching for China or supporting
Huawei or anybody else.
No. We support what's logical and what's right.
And we're also supporting international law.
That's the idea. As one who operates back in my days in Washington, D.C., I was always used to take into consideration the international protocols. When I used to deal with foreign governments on behalf of the United States, I always kept that in the back of my mind, because how my action will be perceived in that country or according to international law. And I always wanted to make sure of that. So, well, as we said last time, Ross, this detention now, as I said, it's coming up to the surface because of the upcoming ruling in August, whether Madam Meng Wanzhou, I pronounced it correctly, it's going to be extradited to the U.S. or not. And this is not a laughing matter, because here is the sad part. Should Meng extradited to the U.S., is going to be here in the U.S. for a long, long time, and we all know what it means.
I think one of the ramifications of this is that the United States will continue to lose prestige and respect worldwide. Lots of people are paying attention to this and seeing that these charges against her appear to be flimsy and not substantiable.
Yeah. Well, even Canada now is being quite. A lot of people around the world are questioning. I've been reading some articles from different parts of the world in some different languages, the languages that I can speak and understand grammatically correct, and there's a lot of questions about Canada's moral standing right now.
Yeah.
Now, for the U.S., they already feel whatever they feel, and they're entitled to their opinions. But for Canada, which, as I mentioned in my in the previous video, that when I was growing up, we always used to think of Canada, as one of the models for how respectful of the law they are. Don't get me wrong, guys. Canadians are wonderful people, like every other nation. It's usually the government that's, but with a behavior like this, when you will expect a head of state to act accordingly, because this is not about his or her ego. This is about the welfare of a nation.
When I was growing up, the reputation for Canada was it was the only civilized country in North America.
Wow.
Now that was a joke. As I met Canadians, I found them really genuinely nice people.
Yeah, they are. They are. So, well, as we mentioned before, now we're starting to see the two tracks that's going to emerge from all this saga. One of them is economic, which we addressed in our video. Just in case you guys didn't see the video, we just released a video about it yesterday, the day before, something like that. And the second track, which we will have in the second part, is the geopolitical ramifications. And there are those who are saying, well, Canada doesn't have to worry about all that.
That's not correct.
It's not. It's not. Geopolitically, economically, rather, no matter what, you will always benefit from a trade with another country. It's like what you hear right now. There are some comments coming out of Australia that's saying, "Oh, Australia is a rich country; it does not need China." Come on.
How many billions of dollars was that? Do you remember?
Yeah,
that was like $235 billion
between Canada and China.
No, between Australia and China.
Oh no, I don't remember the figure exactly, but it was a lot. So
and it's not an insignificant amount between China and Canada.
About 154 to 159. The last numbers I saw.
Oh, that's not much.
Yeah, but for the dimensions of Australia being the richest country on the world, that's no. I will have to say no. It's not the case. So because I'm not suggesting here that Canada will suffer the same fate as Australia, because the volume of trade between Canada and Australia are different.
Oh, very much smaller.
Yeah, Australia, because of the proximity, geographical proximity to China, to Canada is, there's a lot of logistical cost involved, the shipping, insurance, and so forth. So, but economically speaking, Canada is going to feel the pinch of the economic pinch for that, because China has the leverage and it has options economically speaking.
And what we know is their temper has gotten short. They're fed up with China's the enemy. China should be vilified. China does everything wrong. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. And they're fed up. And you see them. They're public figures. They're angry.
That's correct. And mind you that Canada is also under tariffs from the US.
Oh.
Yeah. So that just tells you right there. This is why I don't see it as a request. I looked at it as an order. The White House ordered Canada, and Canada had to bow, which to me was very...
So you think there's some, behind your secret opinion is economic pressure?
Oh, there are some stuff behind the scenes.
Okay.
Oh, there's always something behind that. So this is on the economic side.
Do you think it would be worthwhile to discuss what the charges against Meng Wanzhou really are?
We could. It just is going to take us to a very different path.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that's most has to do with the legal, and where I am not a lawyer. So I don't. When I don't know something, I say I don't know.
Okay.
Because to me, that's always been my understanding of the legal framework for her detentions. It's challenged by the rules and protocol of international law.
Yes.
Yes, there is a treaty between the US and Canada, but there are protocols within that. You can't just extradite people willy-nilly.
Right.
Just because you feel like it, or because you've been pressured. So in the case of Canada, the detention itself was not done legally. That's the bottom line to it. So,
well, as interestingly enough, there are over 1,500 journalists and business professionals in Canada who have denounced this whole process. Well, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, what they say in their country behaving in a way that is against the norm, international norms. To me, those individuals, not only they are courageous enough to, but they really stand for something.
Right.
Because I believe if you go through life without standing for something, then what's the point? You'll be like just existing in a hollow existence. That is, you got to stand for something. Those individuals, because they're seeing where their country is going, Canada, that is, For us in the US, we already know how our system is. It is corrupted to the core. We don't shy away from saying that. And it needs to be fixed. Right. And that was one of the reasons why, you remember a year ago when you and I were having that cup of coffee and we decided, how about if we share our knowledge with others? Yeah. Because of this reason. We wanted to help our country also to sort of see things differently. We can't just be going blindly following policies that emanating from Washington without our say into that. So, but just to go back to the other aspects of the Meng Wanzhou detention, the geopolitical ramification to that. And that usually I'm not going to say much because we want to save that for it, because we already discussed it in the second part that we're going to be releasing. But we will mention a few things. And one of them has to do with how other countries now is going to be perceiving international law. Because geopolitics gets impacted. Geopolitics impacts economics. Economics impacts geopolitics, but also impacts behavior.
Well, how can Canada be trusted? How can the United States be trusted? They break international law and they do not live up to their commitments.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
You're absolutely correct, Ross. Let alone the other issue that Canadian government inadvertently put its citizens under, like the case of the two Michaels.
Oh.
That's just one example. Because here is the thing. If Meng Wanzhou is extradited to the US, there is a possibility that China will execute the two Michaels. Because
I understand they've executed other Westerners that were accused of espionage.
Oh, actually, they did, and there is a sensitive case about that. We're not going to get into it.
Okay, let's avoid that right now.
Yeah, because there's
it's funny how we don't need to go down.
Yeah, and there is an ongoing matter in all that, very, very serious one. So we're not going to get into that right now. But the idea of the two Michaels being, which nobody knows, nobody in Canada knows. Majority in China do not know, the population, but the government, of course, knows, because both countries, Canada and China, usually when it comes down to matters of state like those, they don't disclose the evidence. Even like we have that in the United States. Any case of espionage in the United States, it's done in a closed circuit. I mean, the courts will be, everything will be sealed, everything will be so. But the point on this, the geopolitically speaking, is now Canada, by its behavior, the way it does, it's putting its citizens in danger. So can you imagine the next time a Canadian goes to, let's say, hypothetically, South Korea, you know, and they get kidnapped, or go to Europe and they get kidnapped? Who's to say? You never know.
Right.
Because now Canadians will become a target. You know. So to me, this is where the rationality comes in. You, as a leader of a country, you have to think long term for the consequences of your action. And Justin Trudeau respectfully did not think this through for whatever reasons it did. So one of the things we want to talk about briefly here, Russ, and you seems to have the background info on it, is why the targeting of Huawei. What technology Huawei is providing, and why all of a sudden that?
Here we have probably the biggest tech giant on the planet, based on the internal market and based on the worldwide market. And you take a look at their cell phone development, better, more options, cheaper, cutting edge in every regard. You know that we keep laughing about that 1 million engineers and scientists that graduate every year. Well, China's putting them to good use at Huawei.
That's for sure.
And so we have Huawei phones virtually everywhere, and they're really outdoing the competition. And there are some really great American competition that, by the way, many of the products are built in China.
Yeah.
But then we take a look at the technical infrastructure. Well, guess who's the leader here? And when you take the example of what does modern farming look like across the world, especially in the United States? It's highly technical. And you need the infrastructure, the internet towers that are going to command all the tractors, all the work to be done. And who's been building that infrastructure? Because of the leader, it's Huawei. And you take a look at the hundreds of billions of dollars that Huawei is worth. Worldwide, technical leader, best price, best product. And the United States government says, we're going to slow them down.
Yeah.
Well, that's preposterous. One thing, that 1.4 billion people, even the internal market, is going to support Huawei.
That's for sure.
And so when Meng Wanzhou is arrested, they think they're going to slow Huawei down. I don't think so.
No, they won't.
And change some of the technological demands. Huawei adapts rapidly and recreates itself and is now in compliance with the new rules. So the possibility of slowing Huawei down doesn't seem very reasonable. And using Meng Wanzhou as a bargaining chip seems today ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's not going to work.
It hasn't worked for 2.5 years.
Yeah, you look at yesterday's meeting between China and the U.S. The trade representative, Catherine Lee, I think, or Liu, or something like that. Anyway, they met yesterday. The talks didn't yield anything. It was of no substance whatsoever.
The second time in a row now.
Yeah. And my indication to that is that China has the leverage. So China's looking at it in a way that, like, why bother? Let the Americans talk and we'll see what they have to offer. So, and second thing, yeah, just quickly here. Second thing has to do with Huawei. Huawei is going to reinvent itself.
Of course it is. Yeah. They're going to adapt very rapidly.
Yeah.
They've got the horsepower intellectually
and
technically to do that.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things about Chinese culture, which, as you know, deep dive into that, fascinating. But one of the things we're looking at is the Chinese are civilized in their own approach. They're slow, they're calm, well-reasoned, and polite. And then they run into the United States, who shocks them by a barrage of insults and assaults. That last meeting, I think it was in Vancouver. Where was it? Quebec? I can't remember. Do you remember?
Between the U.S. and China?
Yeah.
It was in Alaska, Anchorage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the Chinese reported they were just shocked at the American behavior.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so they're beginning to get a real hard attitude about this is what the Americans are like.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not what the Americans are like. It's what the American representatives of the government are like.
It's going to be, So, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to tackle one more aspects of this conversation. It has to do with the sanctions. And the last one, then we're going to move into your questions. And all I want to say something very, very brief about the sanctions here. The issue of these sanctions, because the United States argument is that Meng Wanzhou violated the sanctions and so forth. Usually Article 41, Chapter 7 of the United Nations Security Council is the one that is subject to suggesting or implementing the sanctions. In other words, sanctions will have to be conducted through United Nations Security Council.
And the United States signed that agreement.
They did.
And then violated it with 52 sanctions against other countries or companies.
Yeah, that's correct. So when you unilaterally, that's an indication that you are superior to other countries. And usually there's a lot of arguments about using sanctions as a tool, and usually they don't work. So,
well, we certainly see there's a concept of a boomerang arrow.
Yeah, that is correct.
And sanctions have very effectively proven the theory to be correct.
That is correct. So, and this is where we wanted to just highlight this, just bring a brief understanding, if you will, for those who weren't sure about why all of a sudden Meng Wanzhou was arrested, a Chinese executive in Vancouver. So we're going to go to your questions now. And we'll just answer as many as we can. Whenever you have questions, we'll go with them.
What a lot of
wow.
questions.
First of all, thank you all for tuning in here. And please don't forget to click like, because it helps the algorithm. So we truly, truly appreciate that one. So let's start with the first one. Angelo Giuliano, thank you very much, Angelo. Your question is, what is your opinion on the fake news and propaganda related to Shenzhen? It is a. Yeah, go ahead, Russ.
Let's say it in one sentence, because I've done several months of deep dive into this. It's pure propaganda. We haven't found any substantial evidence that this propaganda is true. We have any number of examples that say pure propaganda, and that these people, the Uyghurs and so on, have been brought out of severe poverty. It's one of the most impoverished parts of China. And the vast number of them are now in the middle class. And where the real problem here is they're being forced to learn Mandarin. And so there's major saying, oh, we don't want to learn another language. London, for many years, has taken the poor students from poor sections of London and taught them basic English so they can economically survive and thrive. Well, the Chinese Communist Party is doing the same thing for the Uyghurs.
Next question. Ariel. Good to see you again, Ariel. The question is, could it be that Meng Wanzhou detention is related with stopping the digital Silk Road efforts? Actually, the short answer is yes, because here is what I can share. There are efforts as we speak, as far as impacting the BRI that China has initiative that China has embarked on. So there are behind the scenes initiatives that, shall we say, the West in general wanted to undermine. So this could be, there is part of it, but it's not 100%. The focus on this detention has to do with Huawei and China in itself. Next question. Tian, good to see you, Tian. The question is, we know from Snowden, the Five Eyes are using mobile network to spy on people. If they get replaced with Huawei stuff, how are they going to keep spying? That is a good one, Tian. My short answer to you, there are other ways. There are other ways of spying on that. And yes, what you're referring to, as far as what Snowden was mentioning and all that, has to do with the PRISM, PRISM, the PRISM program that the United States was running without the knowledge of the American people or Congress, for that matter, and which was a violation of the U.S. Constitution and so forth. So the short answer, there are other ways. Tariq, good to see you, Tariq. The question is, why, when Americans tell their ally to reduce their relationship with China, they obey? But when Pompeo told Israel to stop Chinese development of Haifa port, the Israeli refused? That is a good question. I do know a little bit about the Haifa airport. Haifa port, rather, not airport. And the Haifa port has to do with the BRI in the Middle East. But Israel's going to benefit from that big time. And this is why Israel and China, they do cooperate behind closed doors. Usually you won't hear much about all that. It doesn't get published. It doesn't. But there are things going on between the two nations. As to when the U.S. order other countries to do, well, because one of them has to do with the financial system.
Also, what we see from Israel is they go the direction of, we take care of Israel.
Yeah.
And because of the political pressures back in the United States, they can get away with all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Presidents, government, and so on, they're really afraid to go much against Israel.
Yeah, that's correct. Next question. Mark, good to see you, Mark. The question is, Canada is a province of the U.S. Canadian judicial process is overseen by the U.S. State Department. Ms. Wanzhou, detention is completely political, and Canadians do not have a free judiciary. Wow, that is profound. Thank you so much for that question. Interesting enough is one of our viewers, if I'm okay to mention his name is David. So, and very, very insightful gentleman there who always puts some comments. And yesterday he put one of the interesting comments about how the United States is controlling the oil in Canada.
Really?
So, and Canadians have no clue. So this, yes, I can see the argument to that. Because mind you, that also Canada has its own dark history with the indigenous. So, yes, the short answer, yes, there is some influence from the US regarding that. This is why you'll never see Canada oppose the United States. They follow whatever the US order them to do. So, next, Yang Plank. Good to see you, Yang. The question is, I can't see the question there. Israel is important to the U.S. to maintain chaos in the Middle East, to maintain U.S. Dollar reserve currency status. As one who wrote extensively about the Middle East, and I mentioned a lot in my previous writings about the Middle East in general, but also the Israeli-U.S. relationships. Yes, it is a special one, but one of the reasons for that support is to maintain superiority of Israel over any other country in the Middle East. You know, this is why, for example, and I'll give you just one example here, the F-35 fighter jets. The only country that got them first was Israel. There is now a conversation whether United Arab Emirates is going to get some, maybe not. Turkey has been out because they purchased the S-400 missile systems from Russia. So, but for Israel, it's a different story. It's a special relationships because once you understand the makeup of Congress, how it is, then it will make more sense to you why our policy, it is the way towards Israel. Boone, good to see you, Boone. Yeah. By the way, guys, Boone was one of our first member of the Patreon. So we couldn't thank you enough, Boone, for your support. So the question is the release an imminent and a foregone conclusion? Or is the delay of judgments to August a sign that her release might not be that sure now?
Boy, there's two sides of this one. Because what was the judge's name? Hoover?
Holmes.
Holmes.
Yeah.
Was reading the Canadian press, and they're saying that she's putting up the front of, we're going to do a real evaluation here. But it could be just a front, or it could be honest. And the Canadians in Vancouver can't tell the difference. So we certainly cannot.
Well, there is one thing, Ross, that at least my little understanding of international law, whatever, in this particular thing, the delay could also indicate that the prosecutor is going to come hard with a hammer on Meng, because they're going to say, well, we did our we did due diligence,
we did everything we were supposed to do,
so,
and we're gonna transition her to the United States.
Exactly. So the short answer, Boone, it's hard to tell at this point. As we get closer to August, and I'm gonna keep an eye open on this, we probably do a show on it or an update. So as of now, it is hard to tell which direction it's gonna go. Next question, Kwan. Good to see you, Kwan. This saga, the question is, this saga is at the center of the power transition from west to the east for everyone to see and reflect upon. Don't you think, gentlemen? Thank you for your good question and good insight. I couldn't agree more personally, because I've already argued literally for the last couple of years, about 6-7 years. I've been arguing that the shift of wealth is already happening from the west to the east. Asia is gonna be, back then I remember one of my articles back in 2014, if I remember, I mentioned that by 2020, Asia is gonna become the economic hub for global transactions.
Interestingly enough, 1492 is an important date for most Americans. At that time, the World Economic Center was China.
That's correct.
And the Son of Heaven, the Emperor, ruled more people, more money. As a matter of fact, the population of China was in the hundreds of millions then. And it was truly the envy of the West looking at what was going on in China.
Yeah. So the short answer, yes, it is, because that's a tactic. I won't just say the US, but the West in general wanted to use to slow down this rapid growth of China. Ariel, good to see you, Ariel. Do you foresee similar geopolitical conflicts regarding quantum internet and election resonations? There have been a lot of breakthroughs in the US and China recently. Well, there is one, at least the ones I am familiar with. I do not know if it ties to the election, but the one I'm familiar with is the giant steps both countries, China and the US, have made in quantum computing. But China seems to be taking the leads far beyond what the US has achieved so far. You know, Apple and Google's been involved in some quantum computing, but not to the same degree as to what China has achieved recently. And we did a video about the quantum computer. I don't know if you get a chance to see it or not. So as to the impact of on elections, I do not know. I'm
not sure anyone can even begin to fathom. There's so much question about the viability of quantum computing, and if it is possible, what are the implications when things can happen in 1 second that takes a supercomputer 3 days to do? We just don't know.
We don't know. It's one of those things. Next question I'm gonna see is Walid. Good to see you, Walid, and thank you for joining us. I'm glad you could make it. So the question is Trudeau being blackmailed? A few months before Meng's arrest, a photo of Trudeau with blackface appeared. Is it possible that's a tactic that the US uses against other countries? Just asking. I am very familiar with that incident that came up as far as Justin Trudeau. He did apologize. Some weren't convinced about that. Yeah, it's very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Yes, it is a tactic, but also we have to understand the motives, the true, real motives behind her detention. So, which have nothing to do with sanctions. It has to do with the political pressures that needs to be placed on regarding the reduction of the speed by which Huawei, and China. So the bottom line, if there is anything you guys can get out of this conversation, is that the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, got it?
Almost.
Yeah.
Meng Wanzhou.
Meng Wanzhou. So it has to do literally with trying to slow down the lightning speed of growth in China. That's the bottom line to it. Next question. Yes, I saw that one. Thank you, Meng. He mentioned that in 1492 there were 250 million.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for
I
that.
knew the number once upon a time, but I forgot it.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Thank you.
Next question is Tian. Thank you, Tian. Their upper hand is that they got such an independent intact. No, that Tian responding to Ariel. Yeah. So it says their upper hand is that they got such an independent, intact, and powerful industrial base that if you want anything done, products made, you got to get it made in China. We couldn't agree more, because that's the fact. That's the truth. Canada or any other country for that matter, they're going to be thinking in terms of, nowadays you buy anything, it's made in China. Because for us in the US, we don't understand the logic why we have to have products manufactured in China. Do I want to buy a pair of glasses that cost $200 if it's made here in the US? Or do I want to buy a pair of glasses that cost $40?
Or try to buy a cup.
Yeah.
You can't even find one that wasn't made in China.
Yeah. So it's common sense that, because there is always this argument that the West seems to have a hard time accepting it, is that they don't want to admit that they need China more than China needs them. The world, for that matter, needs China more than China needs them. It's a big sheer size of market that if you are ahead of a country, you're going to think about the economic prosperity of your country. You're going to think of Chinese market.
You also have to also another consideration is the number of American companies that are profiting enormously from a presence in
China, and they are.
And it's almost like every major company you can think of has efforts going on in China, and they're making money doing it because of the commodities, because of the Starbucks is a perfect example.
Yeah.
I think they've got 4,000 shops now.
That's correct.
That's more than the United States.
Yeah.
It's just reason they got the population, they got the money to spend.
It's a market, it can't be ignored, no matter how you look at it. So we'll do one more question, and that's it. So, Joe, thank you very much, Joe. The question reads, democracy and allies. That's what it is to me, and human. I am mad as hell about the virus and economic issues and the moving in and our allies' land and sea. Yeah, it's one of those very. I can understand what you are referring to here. There's a lot of areas to cover on all this, and yes, there are a lot of changes coming out through the geopolitical landscape. So anyway, we're gonna have to wrap it up because we're gonna have other stuff to go take care of and prepare the video or next videos for you. Just to recap, why we wanted to share this with you is just to provide you a detailed description as to.
We wanted to give you data points for you to make up your own mind. For those of you in Canada, you get to have some say in what goes on here. Worldwide, there are multiple impacts of this with Meng Wanzhou, and we wanted you to know what they are.
That's correct. So, and we take this opportunity once again to say thank you for your support. We could have not done it without you. We want you to know we do not take your support for granted. So keep it up with us, and we thank you for your support.
And by the way, stay informed.
Stay informed as always. See you guys. Bye-bye.